Welcome to A Better HR Business, the podcast that looks at how HR consultants and HR tech firms grow their businesses and how they help their employers to get the best out of their people. Remember, for show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Okay, let's get started.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Great to have you along, and I'm really looking forward to today's conversation with Dee Coakley. Dee is an amazing woman. She is the co-founder and CEO of a brilliant company called Boundless, and they are making employment very easy for companies to expand and move across the globe. And so Boundless is a global employment solution that enables companies to compliantly employ anyone, anywhere. As an employer of record, EOR, they handle all local employment concerns on behalf of companies, including payroll, taxes, benefits, and compliance with local laws, which is hugely important. And I wish I'd had that when I was doing international HR. But firstly, Dee, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Ben, and it's very good to be here.
Yeah, and we were chatting before we started that it is another cold, wet, miserable day in Dublin and Ireland.
Sure is. It's pretty grey out there.
So, Dee, I was doing some background research on you, and it was hard work because you've done so much. My goodness, so much great stuff. And I think people are going to be fascinated with what you've done in the past. But firstly, let's start with Boundless, if that's okay. Can you tell us what the business is and does, and what are the challenges you solve for employers?
Sure. So we're a global employment platform. So we handle HR compliance, payroll, and benefits for companies with internationally distributed teams. So for companies that might not have an entity, perhaps don't have established operations or infrastructure in a country, we can help that company to get set up to employ workers in that country, really within hours. So if an organization was to do this directly, in many countries, they would need to register an entity, open a local bank account, work with accountants and lawyers locally to figure out what their obligations are, produce locally compliant employment agreements, and so on. But through the Boundless platform, we have established that infrastructure across 30 different countries. And that enables us to act as the legal co-employer locally on our customers' behalf. So they can then piggyback on our tax registrations and so on.
And so what are the kinds of companies that would use you? Are they expanding into new countries, opening up new markets? What are they doing?
So it's lots of different types of companies. We work with lots of tech companies, software businesses, which people usually expect, but probably only about 30% of our customers are in that category. We have customers that are services businesses, a lot of marketing agencies, digital agencies. After that, everything from financial services, manufacturing businesses, a whole host and range of organizations. Why they'd use Boundless? Usually they'll have a set of reasons. It's not just one reason. They might have a number of problems that they're trying to solve. One that we frequently see is that they're struggling to find the right talent in their domestic market, and they want to, at speed and easily, with little commitment, expand out that hiring pool to a global hiring pool. Another can be that they're seeing requests from team members to move, people looking to move back home to home countries or relocate, or they may want to offer that as an employee benefit. If a company is fully remote, they may want to support fully flexible, location flexible working for their workforce. Or a company could be investing in a territory. They may be expanding in terms of operations and they might want boots on the ground. In those instances, sometimes a company will use an employer of record for the first few months while they're getting established in a territory or until they're at a certain level of scale before they establish their own operations.
So I was sort of joking, but alluding to the fact that I wish I'd had Boundless before when I was doing international operations and things like that in the HR bit. But certainly on the hiring side, if you're hiring on, let's say, the tech side of things, we were hiring from India, Romania, South Africa, just a whole bunch of countries. And each time for the HR team, for instance, or the operational team, they would have to look up local laws and do some Googling and maybe find a lawyer in that local area to back up the jurisdiction and how we're going to pay them. It was fairly horrendous. So that would be how they would use you in one particular use case. Is that right?
Absolutely. So I've been that person.
Right.
That's the inspiration for founding Boundless. I spent many years in COO roles, Chief Operating Officer roles, always overseeing the HR function. And I found myself in this position trying to employ people in France or Croatia or Germany, where I was sitting at my desk in Dublin for a while it was in London. And I was thinking, I have no idea how employment regulations work in this territory. I don't have a clue what's involved in the tax regime. I don't speak the local language. And I'm Googling and I'm finding information. I have no idea if it's current. I don't know if this stuff from many years ago. And you don't know what you don't know. And it's very scary. I often say the problem that we're solving is fear.
Yeah.
Stuff really used to keep me awake at night. I had no idea what my obligations were in terms of these workers. So the whole idea is that with Boundless, we take all of that fear away. So at the front end, it's a tech platform. You log in, it's a lovely, slick user experience. You can input a worker's data. The system will auto-generate an employment agreement for that worker. Nice. When you're processing monthly payroll, you do that through the platform. But at the back end, we fully support customers. So there's a lot of service support there as well. So really, we're an extension of our customers' HR team. We're their HR partner. So they will have contacts on our HR compliance team who will have country-specific expertise. So it's a little like having this person on the side tacked onto your team who has specific knowledge around Poland or Canada or Mexico, wherever it is that your workers are.
And I don't think there would be any sort of cultural challenges whereby, it's removing that employment relationship and, you're trying to build up culture across a hybrid or remote workforce. It's just a bit like, a decentralized office, really, isn't it? So what I'm wondering is, does it affect the environment, the culture of the client company?
We get asked about this a lot, and we love the sales prospects or customers that ask us this question. We think these are the people that are the good employers, the people that care about the employee experience and how they'll perceive this. So our customers will continue to own the relationship with the worker. Right. And for day-to-day HR queries, they'll deal with those queries. But where those queries relate to specifics of the employment laws in that country, or where there's something like a tricky termination, or where it's anything relating to payroll, relating to the local tax regime or local benefits, our team can step up and support our customers' HR function with all of that information. Usually the customer will own the communications with the worker, but if it's a complex situation, we're always happy to talk to the worker as well. And our customers often choose to bring us in conversations where perhaps something's very technical and they'd like our direct backup on that.
I think that'd be the easiest way. It's a transparent approach. Now, some of the listeners of this show would be on the consulting side or HR tech or consulting firms. How could they work with Boundless in terms of either referring or partnering when it comes to their own client base?
So we get a lot of inbound from a variety of recruitment firms, HR advisory firms, occasionally employment lawyers. So we spend a lot of time talking to people that are in this space. So people like your audience listening. And they'll come to us because they've been perhaps asked a question by a client, or they're seeing a trend across their clients. And they want to be armed with the right information to support their clients. They want to advise their clients. So sometimes we'll get inbound from HR advisory businesses and they just want to chat to us and find out what an employer of record is and how it works. We're always really happy to have those conversations. And sometimes they'll want a more formal partnership with us. And a partnership could be anything from, we have a partner program. It can be anything from participating in that partner program where you can send referrals to us and we can have an arrangement with you around that. Or it can be that we can employ workers on your behalf effectively. We have worked with staffing agencies in the past where they have their own client base, but they're not in a position to support one or some of their clients in specific countries. And we can step in and be a hand-in-hand partner in that case.
Okay, yeah, I've certainly seen that, like US companies expanding into Europe, not quite sure where to start, so maybe set up a local TA person, an HR person to set up that future team, but then how do they hire that person in the first place? So that's where you could help them expand via the consulting.
Quite often a US firm, for example, coming into Europe, they want to run a bit of an experiment. Maybe they want a 12-month period, a 24-month period where they're looking at the territory and they're not sure how much success they're going to see. So they don't necessarily want to go all in. In the case of something like a financial services business or a fintech business, if they're operating in a regulated space, they're not going to want to establish an entity in a new country until they're quite sure that they're going to operate in that country. And if the first hires are not regulated roles, so if they're not investing roles, for example, if they're some kind of researchers or they might be marketing people or something along those lines, software engineers, for example, it can be a really easy way to dip your toe into a territory, see how it goes. And then if the business makes a decision that they want to really make a long-term investment in that country, then they might choose to move those employees onto a direct entity of their own.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, you've had a long career, a successful career, particularly in the COO space. And so you've been involved in so much. Having set up Boundless, when you came into it in the early stages, were there any lessons, things you were watching out for that you might share with others as to, I'm not going to make that mistake again, or I'm going to definitely do more of something that you've done in the past, particularly around setting up a tech or a larger scale business?
I think a really big one for me is around go-to-market. So both sales and marketing, how you build up your customer base, how you acquire customers. My background was ops. So I had led finance, legal, and HR teams at various businesses. And that was very much my focus. And my focus in the early days was very much about establishing Boundless operationally. So setting up all of this infrastructure in various countries, making sure we had the right HR compliance people on board, the right global payroll team on board, making sure the logistics of how we run payroll every month works well. Invoicing and billing was complex for us, building out various early iterations of the tech product. That was a real focus. And go-to-market was something we tacked on later. If I was starting a startup again, I would certainly make sure I had a go-to-market co-founder on board right from the early stages. One thing we got right, and we can talk a bit more about this, was content. That was something that we invested in really early on that I think anyone with the HR business can invest in. And that paid off really well for us. We saw great results from that. But we didn't have a full, very rounded approach to go to market in those early days. We did founder-led sales for quite some time before bringing in any external salespeople, but we did that through network. And we've probably learned a lot more about sales and demand generation since then, where we have these eureka moments and realize, we probably should have been doing this 2 years ago.
Yeah. Although, having had so many of these conversations and work with different businesses, it is the number one thing. It's that founder-led sales network, early stage anyway, to get the word out there about the business. And I think that's important because then you learn what are the objections and the issues and what works best to convince different types of customers and clients. And then you can pass that off to the teams that come after that, right?
Yeah, and from a product perspective, being close to the customer, talking to sales prospects and customers all day, every day, that is how you figure out what you need to build and where the demand is. And getting really deep. I think you need to do that in any event, but we probably could have had a more rounded approach to demand gen and had additional channels that we'd executed on as well as content earlier.
What do you mean by a more rounded approach to demand gen?
So content was what we focused on. That was our channel. So SEO has been our best performing source of leads and continues to be. But we subsequently, maybe about 18 months, 2 years in, we did some PR, invested in that for a period of probably about a year. And that went really well for us. We had taken a break from that and we've kickstarted that again recently. And I think PR has worked really well for us. So I would have done that earlier if I was doing things again. Partnerships, we kicked off a new partnership there very recently, and it is looking really, really promising. We've never invested heavily in partnerships. Where we have partnerships, they have been opportunities that have kind of landed in front of us. We've been pretty opportunistic about partnerships rather than very strategically identifying who we want to partners and aggressively going after them. But it is that classic thing. You can only do so much. Early stages, small team, limited cash resources. You have to look at what you have in front of you and you have to prioritize. Events is the other thing. where we've always done some work in events, but we're starting to do a lot more now. So a lot more speaking slots at conferences. We don't generally invest in booths or
No.
big marketing budgets for events, but attending, speaking, running masterclasses or workshops and inviting guests along to the conference, that has worked well for us.
Yeah. How do you land the speaking slots? Because they're pretty hot property, right?
They are. I've a few coming up this year, which is great. I will be speaking at Horizon's HR Congress in Amsterdam in a few weeks' time.
Nice.
I'm speaking at Org Payroll World Congress in the US next year. I think it's about relationships. In both cases, both of those organizations, I've known the organizations for a couple of years. Like anything else in business, you're running uphill and you're pushing this snowball, but the snowball does gather more momentum
Yeah.
the higher and higher you go.
Yeah. The analogy someone told me once was that it's like a piece of rope. You start off with a single strand, and as you put in the time and effort to build a relationship, that rope becomes thicker and thicker, like the ones you see holding the ship to the berth. It does take that time and effort. The 80-20 rule, I live by that. So the Pareto principle, I'm guessing that for most stuff you do, like you've mentioned content a few times and partnerships and SEO, that 80% of your traffic will probably come from 20% of your keywords, or same with the content, that there'll be certain things that are more effective. You've covered so much. And for people listening, I recommend you go to the Boundless website to check it out, because there's content, there's videos, there's a really impressive stream of webinars and so on. Is there any particular content that's worked really well for you?
Yeah, we found early on, and I think most of your listeners are in this space where all of us working in HR and in any form of HR advisory, what we are seeking to do and what we need to do is build trust with our client base and build trust with prospective clients. And you need to convince them that you're an authority in this area, that you're a trusted thought leader. So from the very, very early days, we always use this term trusted thought leader. We have to be a trusted thought leader to our customers. And we identified very early on that long form, very deep, quite technical content, it's not going to be everyone's weekend reading, but for people who are interested in getting into the weeds and understanding the detail of HR requirements for specific countries or how different countries compare, we have expertise on the team around that. So our content, almost all of it comes from internally from the Boundless team. So we have a full-time writer on the team, and he will interview people from our global payroll team. He'll interview people from our HR compliance team around different topics. And those people don't necessarily perceive themselves as storytellers. They're not writers, but a good writer can extract those stories from those people. And we will focus on fairly gnarly topics, and the pieces of content that have performed best for us over the years do focus on these gnarly topics. So one that's done really well for us is around Spain and employment regulations in Spain. What we do, employer of record, is actually prohibited under Spanish law. Under Spanish employment regulations, a company can't outsource their responsibilities as an employer. They need to directly employ the worker. They need to directly handle their payroll and so on. So we have a piece about that, and that piece performs really well for us. Generally, at the start of each year, we will do a piece on changes to employment regulations around the world and various countries around the world. That does well. So right now, coming towards the end of the year, we are planning an event that we'll run ourselves, a breakfast event that we'll invite HR leaders to. The topic there will be around what's coming in the new year. We will have various blog posts going out towards the end of the year and at the start of the new year, where we'll break down country by country what regulatory changes are coming in. A lot happens from the 1st of January, right?
Yeah,
so
of
it's
course.
a big turning point in the year. And I'm sure we'll run a webinar on the same topic in December or January. That way we can produce maybe one very comprehensive piece of content, and then we can repurpose it through different channels, and we'll get interest across all of those channels.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like you're covering a range of topics and you're really putting a lot of thought into it. And I agree that having a writer on the team, the fact that maybe they're not an expert in payroll is actually a good thing, because they will hear something and go, oh, that's a bit an unusual angle. Tell me more about that. And so they will find the interesting stories out of what other people might find a dry topic. So yeah, I commend you for that. Lastly, I'm just curious, AI, it's just everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. Is that going to affect your business? Or if so, how?
It's a very good question. So we actually did a team offsite back in June, looking at our own team, how our different teams work together, and encouraging everyone across the team to think about how they can use AI to drive efficiencies for their roles. Now, obviously, in the HR world, we're all dealing with really sensitive data. So the approach that we take is there are certain roles or tasks that people are doing that involve sensitive data. With that sensitive data, we are never using third-party AI, LLMs. We're avoiding that. Many people on our team are doing roles or have certain areas that they're working on where sensitive data isn't an issue, that's not involved. So in those cases, we are encouraging people to use AI where they can. Our global payroll team, for example, use a couple of third-party software products to do their job. These are companies that are global payroll specific companies. So very big on security and data protection and so on. But some of those third-party products are using AI to improve reporting, analytics, and so on.
Okay.
So
So for extracting insights and aggregated results and stuff like that. Yeah. Very
and of
good.
course, for things like insights and aggregated results, you can anonymize data.
Of course, yeah. It's all about security. It just wouldn't work otherwise. I know I said that was the last question, but sorry, I really want to know. There's 2 women founding Boundless, which is an extremely rare combination. What's it like being a female founder these days?
It is indeed. So I started in tech way back about 16, 17 years ago. The world of tech startups was very different. I was based in London at that point in time. There wasn't the awareness of tech startups the way there is now. There wasn't the whole kind of community that there is right now. There certainly weren't as many investors and venture capital funds in Europe. There were a handful in Europe at that stage. And there were very few women, very, very few. So I often went to events where I was the only woman in the room. I don't mean one of few women. That's changed a lot. There are a lot more women across every area of tech now. It's particularly noticeable amongst investors and venture capital. Far more women making investment decisions these days. Still not enough running those organizations. There are people making decisions, but it's very rare to find a female founding team. So women founders account for less than 2%, about 1.6% of all venture capital funding allocated globally goes to women-led businesses, where women actually account for about half of all tech startups globally, but only about 1.6% of funding. So yeah, we are very proud to be a women-led business and to be succeeding and doing well and proving out all of that data that women-led businesses do actually return more for investors for every dollar invested and deliver more in profitability and are more capital efficient and so on.
Kudos to you and the whole team there. So if people want to learn more about Boundless, potentially partner or become a customer client, what should they do next?
Sure, we're always happy to talk to people. I always say we have this team of global HR experts. We have a team of global payroll experts. Often we can answer questions very quickly and easily off the tops of our heads. We are really happy to do so with no obligation. If people ever want to reach out with questions, we're at www.boundlesshq.com. People can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Dee Coakley, D-E-E. Surname is Coakley. And if people are interested in partnering, there are lots and lots of HR advisory businesses, staffing agencies, talent acquisition agencies, where we are their partner for providing employer of record to their clients. I can share a link with you that you can share with your listeners on your website and would love to talk to some of them.
Brilliant. Yeah, we'll do that. So if you're listening to this on the go, check the show notes for the links for LinkedIn, and that was boundlesshq.com, of course. But otherwise, Dee, you've done so many amazing things in your career. It's just going up and up. I congratulate you and the team for what you've done at Boundless, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you, Ben. Great to talk to you.
Thanks for joining us today on A Better HR Business, the podcast that explores the world of HR consulting and HR tech businesses. For show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Remember to subscribe and share the show with any friends who are busy growing a HR business. Thanks, and see you next time.